So I've been reading, which is different for me considering the last couple months. It's been actually pretty amazing to get back to reading. It's a nice change of pace and I'm really enjoying it. So I have quite a few things that I read in May that I will be discussing with you, and a lot of things that are not really in my typical genres, or they haven't been for a very long time. So that might be a little exciting or worrying depending on your tastes. The first thing I read this month was Coraline by Neil Gaiman, and this was actually through the New York Public Library. They were doing a live reading with 4 different people. It was Neil Gaiman, LeVar Burton, Rosario Dawson, and Dakota Fanning, who are reading 2 chapters or so every day for a week. So it was like a live-ish audiobook reading. I think you can still watch the videos. They're on YouTube, on the New York Public Library YouTube. I can link it. And they basically just read you the story, which was just so much fun. I have watched Coraline many times, and I've also read the graphic novel, I think last October, around the Halloween time. But I'd never read the story so far, so this was my first time experiencing the actual words that Neil Gaiman wrote, and it was so much fun. Coraline is about an adventurous little girl who sort of feels like her parents are ignoring her. She ends up going through a door in her house to another world that looks almost exactly like her world, except her parents pay much more attention to her. They're much nicer. They cook her good food. The only difference is that they have buttons for eyes, and they want to sew buttons on Coraline's eyes too. This is a middle grade, but it sort of leans a bit to horror, as Neil Gaiman does. It's very whimsical and magical, but also kind of creepy at the same time. I was already in love with the story. I've experienced it many times at this point, and so it was just really nice getting to hear the actual words of Neil Gaiman's writing, because I felt like the one thing I was missing from the graphic novel was that a lot of it is visual, so you don't get all of the words that Neil Gaiman wrote. And so I knew I wanted to read it at some point. I was planning actually to read it in October, but then they had this live reading, so I was like, why not? I might as well just listen to them read it to me, because that's an amazing experience in itself. And I did really enjoy it. I love Neil Gaiman's writing, and I love this story, so I just had so much fun, and it got me back into a reading mood, like very slowly, a step at a time, because they only read a couple chapters a day and I had to wait a full week to get the full story, even though I wanted it basically immediately. But I think it was actually really good for me, and it slowly eased me back into wanting to read again. Wow, why'd my light go out? Oh, it overheated. That is really hot. Okay, we will see how long this lasts, if it lasts at all. Oh, okay. Oh no. Oh god, okay. This is not gonna work. Alright, let's try a different light. Wow, that looks really bad. I was trying to do something different with the light because I haven't liked how it's looked in the last couple videos, but apparently this light can't handle it. So it's going to kind of look like I am filming in a dark cave, which I kind of am because it's raining outside and there's no light. So I'm sorry. We can just pretend that it's a cozy evening atmosphere where I just talk about books. Let's just go with that. Anyway, if you wanted to listen to this version of Coraline, I will try and leave the link below. I would highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. It's very short as well. Coraline is a really short book. It is a middle grade, so it takes literally no time to get through it. I think it ended up being 8 days of 30-minute sort of chunks, so it's not really that long at all, and it's very worth it. Next, I finally finished Fortress in the Eye of Time by C.J. Cherryh. I've been reading this since February, I think. It's taken me a very long time, but I'm so glad I stuck with it and I read it because I really ended up enjoying this a lot. I did a real crap job explaining what this is about in my last video where I was updating my reading, so I'm going to try and do better this time, hopefully. So this is about a wizard who lives in an isolated tower, and he has a lot of mystery around him. He's kind of a recluse, and he ends up bringing to life a shaping in the form of a man. But the shaping isn't quite what he expected him to be. He's very naive and almost like a child in a man's body. And this book follows that shaping's journey as he enters into the world and tries to accomplish what this wizard wanted him to accomplish. This is full of politics and ancient magic and legends and centuries of history, and it's so deep and so good. It is a very confusing read. The syntax in this is not usual. It's not straightforward at all. It's written in a really odd way that the sentence structure is just weird and it doesn't really make sense, and the descriptions are like really long and lush and kind of convoluted. So it is that sort of fantasy. It's that old like high English but not high English, just like really confusing descriptions and run-on sentences and things that start with came the wind and yeah, that. So it's not really a straightforward read. It's not what we normally see. It's like the complete opposite of Brandon Sanderson. His straightforward writing style of fantasy, that's not what this is at all. It is very detailed and descriptive and convoluted, really. It took me ages to get into it just because that writing style made it really hard to understand what was actually happening, but after a little bit you get used to the writing style. It's the same as when you're reading like a classic or Shakespeare. In the beginning you're not going to understand anything, but after a couple pages of reading it you get more into it and it makes more sense and it flows much more naturally. In addition to the writing just being kind of hard to get into, the beginning of the story is also really hard to get into. The first chapter is just a name drop of a bunch of different things over 2 centuries of history with countries and buildings and empires and people that you have no idea about whatsoever. So it is very intimidating to get into, but it was definitely worth it. The story, once you start getting to know the characters and once people start exploring the world and trying to figure out what this old wizard's motives were, is just so fascinating. There's so much mystery, there's so much intrigue, and there's a lot of both human politics between different countries and also like this darker magic and old magic coming back. It's so good. It's interwoven so well, and it really just makes you want to keep reading it. After a certain point, I did not want to put it down. I wanted to know what happens, and I never thought I would have said that in the beginning. I actually DNF'd this book years ago, and it was just recently that I picked it up again, and I am so glad that I did. It's not a book that I've heard anyone talk about ever in my life, and it doesn't have that many ratings on Goodreads, even though this author is a Hugo winner. But I am really glad that I picked it up at the used bookstore in September of 2013. And I will be continuing with the series. I think it's a 5-book series, or 4, because I think the 5th book is technically like years after the events of the first 4 books. I don't really know, but I plan to read them all because it's just a really fascinating world that I want to get back to. The characters are very complex in their motivations and sort of their reactions to things and their actions, and how they interact with the other characters. The growth of the shaping throughout this story is just incredible. You literally see him going from this really naive little boy inside a man's body to being something else entirely, which I'm not going to say. But it was so fascinating and so believable watching that story arc. And there's just so much happening with this mysterious magic and with how the human countries are going to interact with each other. I guess they're kingdoms. How the kingdoms are going to interact with each other. It's so fascinating, and I am very excited to read the next book. If this sounds like something that won't be too intimidating for you, if you like really high fantasy, if you like a lot of magic, a lot of politics, and you don't mind a really descriptive old kind of writing style, I think this was written in like the 80s, then I would say definitely pick it up, please, because I would love to have someone to talk to about this, because no one has read this book, and I am just so impressed by it. So if you have any interest at all, please pick it up. I really enjoyed it. So after that, I went back into the Discworld with Lords and Ladies by Terry Pratchett. This is the 4th book in the Witches series and the 14th in the Discworld series. Normally you can pick up Discworld at any point, but this specific Witches series should be read in order. This is actually one of the only sub-series in the Discworld that I've seen that actually does continue the story on in subsequent books. Not really as one like overarching thing, but the events of previous books definitely impact the next book. But this one is about elves that are trying to come back to the Discworld, only these elves are sinister and evil and completely not like elves you're used to seeing in fantasy. I actually thought that the elves in this were much more tied to how fantasy normally portrays fairies. They're that really just cold, calculating sort of people, and they talk in riddles while not actually straight up lying to you. So that's something that I normally see reserved for fairies, which would make sense because this is also a sort of retelling of A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare, which does have fairies. It doesn't really follow the plot of Midsummer Night's Dream at all. It's just like they have the different groups of people. There's a royal wedding, you have the fairy people who are actually elves, and then you have the motley crew of stage performers who are actually just like village workers. So it's generally set up the same way, but it's its own story completely. And I really liked this one. The witches are just a really fascinating group of women to follow. They have such distinctive personalities that get them in a very particular situations, and yet they're also so clever and they figure a lot of things out. There are so many ties to like quantum mechanics in this book. That's something that Terry Pratchett really likes to play with, but it came up a lot in this book, how different parallel universes and everything sort of tie into his Discworld universe. It's very interesting. I will say this is one of the cruder books of his. There are a lot more references to not very savory things. So if you don't really like any of those, I would probably stay away from this book in general. But otherwise, it's a lot of fun. The plot definitely kept me engaged, and it was, I think, one of the better constructed plots that I've seen in Discworld so far. So I really enjoyed it. I like how the Discworld series is going on this upward trend recently, so I'm very much looking forward to continuing, which I did, sort of, because I read the next book, technically, which was a short story called Theatre of Cruelty. It's a little short following the City Watch in Ankh-Morpork. I don't know how you're supposed to actually say that. Okay, if I try it with a British accent, is it Ankh-Morpork? Ankh-Morpork? The city in Discworld that you always read about. It follows them. And it's sort of a parody of a particular form of English theater, puppet theater, that I can't remember the name of right now. Is it Judy and Todd or something? It's very short and simple, but I definitely had to look it up afterward in order to get the reference because I am not British and I don't have that sort of a theatrical background. But it was fun, it was cute, it's just a little short story. It's not something that you definitely need to read, but it's a nice little addition to the Discworld. And then after that, I went completely into left field and I started craving historical fiction, in particular historical romance, which, if you have watched my channel for the last year that I have been uploading videos, I have never once read a historical romance in the past year and a half, but I did used to read a lot of it when I was younger, and I just haven't in a long time, and I don't know why. So I went back to it because that's what I was craving, and I have had a very fun time binging a lot of historical fiction. So before I go completely out of my normal genres, I did read a book that is a historical fiction fantasy sort of blend, and that was The Vine Witch by Luanne G. Smith. This is set in early 1900s France, I think, but witches are common. In particular, in this book, you're following a vine witch who works in a vineyard in order to create amazing wine. At the beginning of the book, she is in the form of a toad because she's been cursed, but she quickly breaks out of her curse and vows to get revenge on the person who cursed her. But when she goes home, she finds that her vineyard and her home have been bought by a stranger. I fell in love with this world. It is so amazing. The descriptions of the vineyards and everything is just so lush and so atmospheric. It has such a calm provincial atmosphere that is just so amazing to lose yourself in. The world is incredible. There are witches who do a bunch of different things. There's a baker witch, there's vine witches, there's so many things, and I love it so much. The descriptions are beautiful, and even though I kind of really hate wine, I really enjoyed reading about it. You can tell that the author really enjoys her wine, and the world is just so beautifully written. Unfortunately, everything else kind of fell a little bit flat. The characters didn't have really any chemistry at all. There's a sort of romance that came out of nowhere because these two characters didn't really interact very much at all that you saw in the book. There were time skips where you assume they interact, but really what you've actually seen on page is them talking maybe twice and then suddenly they're in love with each other. So that was not really great. The plot, I felt, sort of overstretched itself. There was a lot happening that it didn't really feel like it was fleshed out as much as it needed to be in order to be satisfying. So while I overall enjoyed myself, I don't see myself continuing in the series. I really, really love the world. I wish we could just get more of this world and just like having a calm, peaceful life. I would read a slice of life book in this world because it's just so interesting. There's so many facets to like the witchcraft and just how the world functions in general with all these witches, and it's so cool. But I think the characters definitely need a lot of work and the plot just needs to be refined a little bit. I would still recommend it for the world and this really interesting take on witches, but I would just say you shouldn't expect too much from the character relationships. And then going completely into historical romance, I picked up Courtney Milan. So I started her Brothers Sinister series with the Governess affair, which is a little novella. It's a prequel to the series, and it's available for free on the Kindle store if you would like. It's about a governess who shows up at a duke's mansion and demands a retribution. I can't say too much just because it's a novella and it's also a romance, so you know how pretty much it'll go. But it was a really good introduction to Courtney Milan for me and to her series because the series is about the following generation. Obviously, I enjoyed it enough to continue into the main series, so I picked up the Duchess War, which is about a duke and a lady who has a lot of secrets to hide. This is very tactical and very political. There is a lot of chess involved and like tactical strategy, so it's really very interesting, as well as just being an amazing fluffy romance as well. The two characters definitely have a lot of learning to do with each other, and you can see them grow in their relationship throughout, and it was so beautiful to watch. The hero definitely isn't perfect and he makes a lot of mistakes, but what's really great about the story is you see him accept his mistakes and learn from them. The drama and intrigue is fascinating and it made me read the book in 2 days. The characters are very clever and I enjoy them a lot. There's a friend group that is just so hilarious together with all of their banter, and it's so much fun, and I just really enjoyed the book. I don't really know how to review romance books. It is not something that I am used to doing, really. Actually, I think it's the first adult romance that I have ever read. Normally, when I was younger, I would read a lot of like YA historical romance, so this is my first time actually venturing into adult romance. And I'm really enjoying it. So I ended up reading the next novella in the series, which is A Kiss for Midwinter. And this is following a friend of the first girl in the first book, and it's also very cute. All of these books have a sort of deeper subject matter. There is definitely a serious vein through it all. So it's not completely just like light, fluffy romance, but it does also have that. It's just a really good balance between the two, actually. You have the fluffy, like swoony romance on one side and then some actual like serious trauma problems on the other, and I think that it was handled really well. It was interwoven really well and I just really enjoyed it. I didn't like that novella quite as much because the hero is kind of an ass, but it was still really fun and I'm still continuing to read the series. I actually also read another novella from her that's not related to the Brothers Sinister series, and that was A Right Honourable Gentleman. It's also very short. It's about another governess and a master. It's very good. They're all very good. It puts you right into the perfect like historical time period, and the romances are so cute. They're progressive, definitely. It's not something that would have happened in that time, but it's just adorable to read, and I have already started the next book in the Brothers Sinister series, so I'm having a lot of fun on my historical romance kick. It's not something I would have thought I would pick up this year, but I am very glad that I did because it's been very distracting and just very warm, fuzzy, and perfect and comforting. So I very much enjoyed it, and it's making me read really, really fast, which I have not done in a very long time. So those are all of the books I read in May. I have been on a reading kick, even though I did not get to the Dragon Republic. I said I was going to participate in the Asian readathon, and I didn't end up reading the one book that I set myself for that readathon, unfortunately. I do have it checked out from the library. It's literally sitting on my phone right now. It's an audiobook, and I've had access to it for like the past week, and I just haven't started it. I'm just so intimidated by it. I'm so scared about what's gonna happen that I just don't start it because I'm stressed, and I don't want to be stressed. So I don't know when that's going to be read. I'm definitely going to read it. I'm very excited to read it. It's just, I am in the mood for something much lighter right now, and that is why I turned to historical romance, because it is very light and fluffy, even though it does have a lot of darker tones. I mentioned that already. I'm just repeating myself. I have been enjoying reading. There is an annoying siren outside. I have been enjoying reading, even if it's not what I normally read. I am just having a great time. My battery is going to die, and I need to go now. If you have any recommendations for historical romance, because that is what I'm feeling right now. I know I am planning to read some Tessa Dare very soon, but there are more holds on my library for that, so we will see when I get to that. If you have anything else that you think I would like, please send it my way. I am completely new to the whole romance genre, adult romance genre, so that would be very much appreciated. And I will see you later. Bye.